Post-Dispatch columnist. You can read him in the newspaper. You can read him at stltoday.com, and you can certainly hear him Tuesdays and Thursdays on the Big 550 KTRS. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning. 2 days in a row. Holy cow.
Holy mackerel. People are going to start talking about us. So over the weekend, your column blew the lid off this scandal where one future state rep who's running unopposed accused another future state rep running unopposed of rape. He came out yesterday and said, not true at all. This is turning out to be a quagmire. What's going on?
Well, I mean, the statement that he issued yesterday was pretty expected. His attorney told me roughly the same thing Friday night, and that is that his defense is that their encounter was consensual. The rest of that statement is really his attempts to slut shame the rape victim. I mean, he's really just trying to throw her reputation under the bus, which unfortunately is one of the things that happens all too often in rape cases. It's what makes it difficult for women to come forward, and really makes Cora Faith Walker's situation, makes her that much more brave. She walked into this knowing what was going to happen to her. She knew what he was going to say. She knew that her reputation was going to be at question, because that's what happens often in rape cases. And it's unfortunate, but nothing in the statement particularly surprised me. And let's sort of focus on his statement for a second. When you allege a consensual relationship, there are texts, there are emails, there are receipts, there are all sorts of things that can sort of support your defense of that. So you would think if he's going to say that it was consensual, he has some type of evidence to back that up. Well, two things. Both Rosenblum Friday night and then again in the statement used very similar language, saying that they have documentary evidence to somehow show it was consensual. Well, if they do, I'm not sure why they didn't show their hand yesterday and put an end to this thing. But secondly, there's a difference between what may or may not have been a consensual relationship at some time and still a very valid rape allegation. No means no, and no means no even if you're in a consensual relationship. And so the idea that because they may or may not have had a relationship at one point doesn't negate the fact that this woman said she was raped. Excellent point. There is a police investigation going on. Do we have any idea the timeline of this police investigation? I don't. Investigations of this sort take a while. I know that they have interviewed Cora Faith Walker, the police have. I know from law enforcement sources that there is a potential that this case gets sent to a prosecuting attorney outside of the city, and that would delay things for some degree. That's what happened the last time Steve Roberts Jr. was accused of a sexual assault. It was actually, he was arrested, the case was sent to St. Charles County prosecutor, and then ultimately charges were not brought against him, and he maintained his innocence in that case as well. We know Cora Faith Walker is married, and her husband is supporting her side of the story. Is Stephen Roberts Jr. married? I don't believe so. Okay, so he's not married, and so he wasn't cheating on his wife with this quote-unquote consensual relationship. Where does it go from here, Tony Messenger? Well, and just real quick, we don't know if anybody was cheating on anybody's spouse. Right. That's why I said, I put it in air quotes. I apologize. I didn't. Right. Yeah. I didn't see the air quotes. But, certainly
only I did.
Yeah. I mean, to be clear for listeners, when I interviewed Cora Faith Walker Friday, it was with her husband, and he was there, and he was supportive, and I talked to him about it as well. So, right. I think that's important for people to know. So where does it go next? I think a couple of things. I mean, obviously the main thing is the investigation takes place, and at some point, particularly in a case that's this high profile, the police or the prosecutor will ultimately make, some sort of public statement. There will either be an arrest or there won't, and we'll find out what their thinking is there. But the controversy as it relates to what happens in the Capitol continues. You have a woman who was asked, the Speaker of the House, to not seat Mr. Roberts. You have Democratic leaders in his party suggesting that he not fulfill his office, that he step down. I believe that Speaker of the House, Todd Richardson, is going to take this seriously based on his actions during the intern crisis that happened under the previous Speaker's watch. I think he's going to take this seriously regardless of whether there is ultimately a prosecution. And so, the question at that point is, do you treat this like a domestic violence case? In a domestic violence case, a woman will often make an allegation against a significant other, and the way the law reads, she is often granted immediate protection by both the police and the courts from the person she's accusing of having abused her, before there is ever any sort of adjudication of the charges. And so I would suggest that might be a model that the Speaker of the House follows if we get to January and Cora Faith Walker and Steve Roberts Jr. are both, state reps, duly elected state reps, being prepared to serve in the same building. It's a large building.
It's a large building, but it's one small chamber. And so the question is, what authority does he have if he kicks Roberts out of the assembly? Then the people he represents doesn't have representation in the assembly. So this is multiple layers of trying to figure this out.
Yeah, it's complicated. I think if we get to that point, I would guess that one of two things will happen. Either the Speaker will ask the Attorney General for an opinion on what his options are, or the Speaker will convene some sort of ethics committee hearing. There's a standing ethics committee that has occasionally dealt with complications that have at least some connection to this sort of thing, not in terms of a rape allegation, but there have been previous questions raised about whether or not a House member can be seated. I believe there will be some sort of committee that will then listen to some discussion in a public forum and try to make some sort of decision on how to make sure that Cora Faith Walker and other women are protected in the Capitol.
Tony Messenger, they went and met at an apartment. Was it his apartment? Was it her apartment? Was it somebody else's apartment? Do we know where they met?
I can't say definitively. I know it was an apartment in the city.
That's all we know at this point.
That's all I can definitively say.
Tony Messenger, St. Louis Post-Dispatch columnist, with us every Tuesday and Thursday, and he is a writer for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, stltoday.com. Tony, thanks for checking in.
Thanks, McGraw. Talk to you later.
625, Big 550.